Hello everyone, and welcome back to another series with ArtSpark Texas. This series of videos focuses on people, places, and things. Hey everyone, in this series we're going to be talking about three important areas of art: portrait, landscape, and still life. The first three videos are going to help us just understand how to create these pictures more accurately, how to make our portraits look more like the person we're drawing, how to make our landscapes feel more realistic and have space, and how to get our still life objects the right size and in the right place, and also have that depth and dimension. The supplies you'll need for this project are a sheet of watercolor paper, watercolor pencils, a synthetic brush, and a cup of water. But you could certainly do this project with just standard drawing supplies. Welcome to Lesson 5, our second landscape. In this landscape, we're going to be working on Maya Angelou's Birthplace, and we'll use this as a reference. Now remember, in this series, you can pick any subject you'd like, and I'd love for people to pick personal stories. In particular, if it's maybe someone in their family that they want to make a portrait, landscape, and a still life about. I think that'd be great. Okay, let's begin step one of this drawing by taking out a clean sheet of watercolor paper, one of our color pencils. I'm choosing a brown once again. I'm going to start by giving myself a few construction lines, a ground plane horizontal line, so a line for the ground across the bottom, and then a vertical, just so I know where the middle of my picture is. And though this is a building that we're starting with, we're going to start with the largest object. It's essentially a box. So I'm going to start with a vertical to represent one of the walls, and I'm going to match my roof lines with the angles that I see in my reference picture. So I may have to adjust this from time to time. It's difficult to get these angles perfect the first go around, but this is why we're sketching, and then we'll come in later and claim these lines. These roof lines are mostly going to run parallel to one another. You'll notice as we go further to the left, they do start to taper just slightly. But essentially all those lines, once you get one angle, you can draw parallel lines from there. Now I want to measure for the windows that are on the right wall. I'm giving myself some center lines just like I would the apple or the orange or the flower pot from our first still life. Same thing with these windows. I want to give myself a center line and then try to sketch out what space they occupy. And so here I'm just going in and kind of claiming those rectangles and darkening them in. Once I get a line that I'm confident with, I want to make that a bit darker just so I remember this is the line that you're using. And eventually we'll come back and we'll get into details as far as the wood frame that's inside of this window. But I just want to get the scale of these windows first. Okay, now that we've got the windows placed in, we can go ahead and even sketch in a detail really quick, like that shrub. The windows help me measure and help me know exactly where that shrub will fall. I want to start working now on the front of the building, the front of the house. This foundation has its own line. If I want to place these windows, once again, I don't just draw them in the first time. I want to make some measurements for them. Allow the drawing to help me, or the reference image to help me measure for these windows. I know the windows are the same size, and so I can draw a center line for those windows and then measure out from there. The most difficult portion that we're probably going to have drawing this house is this little porch area. And it's got a couple of vertical lines for the posts. Then I need to match the angles of that roof and sketch that in. And make those angled lines continuing to look back to your reference. Even if you're drawing on a picture that's not like mine, this process remains the same. Start with the largest object and then pick it apart. Make measurements. Allow the picture reference that you're using to give you some information and compare things side by side. The horizontal lines that we drew for the foundation and the bottom of the windows we're going to use in drawing in the porch. So I'm going to make my railing run parallel to those lines. Everything has to align in that way. And then even the railing for the stairs is going to run across those lines and the vertical post down to the ground. Keep in mind all these lines that are parallel to one another if they're in relationship. The stairs themselves run parallel to the foundation line, and then I just drop verticals down to define the edge of those stairs. The lines for the door are verticals that match up with the posts that support the porch. I've got a few more windows to sketch in over here, and so I want to give myself maybe a center line. Luckily, I've already drawn in these horizontal lines, so I know how large these windows should be. They all have to line up along the bottom edge and top edge that I've already sketched out. Okay, now that we've set most of the house in place, there is a concrete staircase that happens along the front yard of the house here. I'm going to give myself a large shape at first, just to measure in the space. Then I can give myself some horizontal lines that go across and some short little vertical lines that capture the edge of those stairs. These stairs are kind of drawn in perspective, and so they get smaller as they go back. The stair piece on the bottom right will be most visible, and the stair piece that's on the top left will be the least visible. This gets a little bit tricky, but continue to play with these, and I definitely had to. It took more than one sketch. Now I'm starting to build this a little more accurately. You can see I've got my rectangles defined for the front of the stair, and then I'm trying to create that space for the little platform of concrete as it goes up. In step 2, we're going to focus on the organic shapes in the picture. We finished most of the architectural or straight line shapes here, and now we're going to draw these curvilinear forms. The grass, the bushes, the trees. What I'm trying to do is capture the gesture of these objects, which means I don't have to draw it perfectly, I just have to get the general shape of the object. In step 3, we're going to get started picking apart our highlights and shadows. You'll notice on an architectural structure, the shadows are oftentimes more angular because the building is more angular, right? So we get some real straight line shadows here. I'm starting with the right wall and just trying to draw in some of those shapes. I'm not going to go all the way through how we would watercolor or shade this picture, but I want us to get started together. Add a few details here. I would use my watercolor pencils for all these details. It's just way easier to control. Just to bring in a little water in step 4, I'm going to start activating some of these areas of the shadows, starting with my areas that have the most pigment, and then allowing that to spread into areas that might have a highlight, just the way we've done with the portrait and some of our previous pictures. We're using that same technique here. As I said, we won't go through this one all the way through, but you can imagine how once you start to add your textures, the brickwork itself, and add a little bit of that grass highlight and shadow, this picture will really start to come to life. Continue adding your detail, and I hope you enjoyed this project. Thank you to our ArtSpark funders, Texas Commission on the Arts, Christopher and Dana Reeves Foundation, St. David's Foundation, Austin Public Library, Cultural Arts, City of Austin, and the Donald D. Hamill Foundation.